I just don't understand how this could have happened.
I woke up to a sting on my scalp and a note pinned to my pillow. Now you finally look your age. That single line froze the breath in my throat. My hand flew to my head, and what I felt made my stomach twist. Smooth skin, raw, burning. My hair, my silver crown I'd cared for all these years, was gone. For a moment I couldn't even scream. I just sat there, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air, mixed with the sweet perfume I'd smelled far too many times on my future daughter-in-law. I didn't need to guess who had done it. The world blurred for a second, but I didn't collapse. Instead, a strange calm filled me. I turned to the safe beside my bed, the one holding the documents for the wedding gift, a property and financial transfer worth nearly 20 million pounds. That gift was meant for my son and his bride. I had told myself it would be my final act of love, a bridge to keep our family close. But as I held that envelope in my trembling hands, I realized the bridge was already in flames. I placed the papers back into the safe, locked it, and whispered to the empty room, "No one's getting a penny today." My reflection in the mirror stopped me cold. The woman staring back was unrecognizable, her scalp red and tender, her eyes hollow but burning with something fierce. I saw humiliation, yes, but beneath it, a spark I hadn't seen in years. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted me small, silent, hidden. But that was the morning I decided to arise. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, the same man who'd helped me build my company from nothing. "Hold the transfer," I said flatly when he answered. "Not a single pound leaves my account. And tonight, I need you at my home. We're rewriting everything." He hesitated. "Is something wrong?" I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "Nothing's wrong," I said softly. "I've just woken up." The house felt colder than ever as I crossed to my wardrobe. I picked out a charcoal silk dress, one I bought to celebrate a major deal years ago, and smoothed the fabric like it was armor. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was steady. They could strip away my hair, but not my dignity. When my hairdresser, Clara, arrived 20 minutes later with a black case, her eyes widened the moment she saw me. "Oh my God, Evelyn," she whispered, but I cut her off with a quiet, steady voice. "No questions. Just help me look like myself again." For the next hour, the house filled with the sound of brushes, pins, and soft murmurs. When Clara placed a silver gray wig over my head, soft, natural, perfectly fitted, I almost didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She looked stronger, colder, ready. After Clara left, I sat by the window watching snowflakes drift over the stone pathway. Memories flooded in, of struggle, of nights when I built my company brick by brick while raising my son alone. I remembered promising him, as a widow, that he would never know hunger or fear. Every long night, every sleepless deal, every risk, I had done it all for him. And now, all that I'd built stood on the edge of being handed to someone who saw me as a burden to be erased. I touched the wig lightly, the cool silk against my fingers, and drew a long breath. They thought they'd broken me, but all they'd done was remind me who I was before I let love make me weak. By the time the clock struck 10, I was ready. I slipped a small voice recorder into my purse. Instinct told me that proof, not emotion, would save me now. I wrapped a wool coat around my shoulders and stepped outside. The air was sharp and cold, biting against my skin, but I didn't flinch. Today was my son's wedding day, the day I was supposed to hand over my fortune and my heart in one gesture. But as I stared out at the world beyond the frosted window, one thought settled deep inside me like steel. They wanted to play a cruel game. I was going to change the rules. As the car moved through the quiet streets that morning, the city still blanketed in soft snow, I couldn't help slipping into the past.
The years that shaped me, the ones that taught me how to survive alone. I was 32 when my husband, Daniel, died. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary as any other. One moment, he was driving home from a meeting. The next, a phone call shattered the world I knew. Sudden cardiac arrest, they said. The words didn't make sense. They still don't. I remember standing in the hospital corridor, the smell of disinfectant thick in the air, my hands trembling so badly I couldn't sign the release papers. At home, our son, Adrian, was just 12. He asked me where his father was with a face too young to understand loss. I had no answer. That night, after putting him to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the flickering light on the wall. Everything felt empty. The house, the air, even my chest. But as I looked at Adrian sleeping on the couch, his small hands clenched under his chin, something inside me hardened. If the world had decided to take everything, I would build it all back myself. The next morning, before the sun rose, I made coffee, tied my hair back, and went out searching for work. I had no business degree, no investors, no one to lean on. But I had grit, the kind born from necessity. I started as a property assistant for a small agency, earning barely enough to cover groceries. I spent my evenings poring over real estate books borrowed from the public library, teaching myself everything from contract law to zoning codes. There were nights when exhaustion blurred the print on the pages. My eyes burned, my back ached, but I refused to stop. Each new term I mastered, each skill I learned, felt like a brick laid towards something bigger. The first few years were brutal. I woke before dawn, packed Adrian's lunch, and walked through freezing mornings to catch the first bus to work. I took every client no one else wanted, the rundown homes, the impossible listings. Most turned me away with polite pity. "You're new, right? Maybe next time." I'd smile, thank them, and return the next day anyway. Some nights, I'd open the fridge and see only a bottle of milk and half a loaf of bread. I'd tell Adrian, "I already ate earlier," and watch him finish his dinner while I pretended to sip tea. I made sure he never saw the hunger behind my calm smile. He was my reason to fight. Years passed like that, a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and relentless willpower. By the time Adrian turned 15, I'd saved enough to buy my first property, a small 2-bedroom flat in desperate need of repairs. I still remember signing the contract. My hands shook so much that the pen left a smudge on the last page. I walked out of that office feeling both terrified and alive. That little flat became the cornerstone of my new life. From there, I built one property after another, each one a victory carved out of sweat and sleepless nights. I took risks, reinvested, negotiated, and worked until the bones in my fingers ached. Slowly, people in the city started to know my name. Not as a widow trying to survive, but as Evelyn Hart, the woman who turned nothing into an empire. But success comes with its own cost. As my business grew, I began losing the quiet closeness I once shared with Adrian. He went to private schools, made new friends, and got used to comforts I never had. I wanted to give him everything his father would have wanted: safety, security, a future untouched by struggle. But I see now what I really gave him was a world without consequence. At 18, he got his first car, a gift I couldn't afford but gave anyway. At 20, he went abroad for university. I paid every tuition fee without a thought. And by the time he came home, he looked at me not as a mother, but as a resource. It started small. "Mom, could you help with the down payment for my flat?" Then it grew. "Mom, Sabrina and I are planning a trip through Europe. First class, of course." His tone wasn't even a request anymore. It was an expectation. And like a fool blinded by love, I said yes every time. I told myself I was simply helping my son build his life, but each check I wrote only built walls between us. When he brought Sabrina home the first time, I wanted to like her. She was beautiful, charming, and confident. The kind of woman who could walk into any room and make it hers. But the way she looked at me was something I couldn't name at first. It wasn't hostility, it was assessment. The look of someone calculating value. Still, I tried. I told myself time would soften her, that if I gave her warmth, she'd give it back. I hosted dinners, offered help, ignored her subtle jabs. That dress is so classic, or you're so strong for your age. I let them slide because I was afraid of being left out, of losing my son completely if I pushed back. Every time I handed them more, a car, a vacation, a check, I convinced myself it was love. But love that must constantly buy its place is not love at all. It's ransom. And I paid that ransom for years. Now, sitting in that car on the way to their wedding, I realized I'd mistaken generosity for devotion and silence for peace. That morning, when I saw my reflection, bald, humiliated, yet burning with fury, it was as if the universe ripped the blindfold off. I saw the truth. All the money, all the sacrifice, every sleepless night had brought me to this, to a son who saw me as a vault and a daughter-in-law who saw me as an obstacle. The snow outside grew thicker, blurring the streets in white. I stared at the window, at the world I'd once conquered, and whispered to myself, "You've rebuilt your life before. You'll do it again."
By the time I reached the church, the snow had thinned into a pale drizzle, coating the stone steps with a glassy sheen. The building rose above me like something sacred and ancient, its bells echoing faintly through the gray morning. Guests were beginning to arrive, bright scarves, chatter, perfume clouding the cold air, but I felt as if I were walking into a courtroom instead of a celebration. Inside, the stained glass windows threw fractured rainbows across the pews. I chose a seat near the front and folded my hands, pretending to pray. In truth, my thoughts were miles away, somewhere between grief and fury. The wig sat lightly on my scalp, hiding the damage but not the ache. Each heartbeat reminded me of what had been done. I watched the staff move quickly up the aisle, setting white lilies and lighting candles. Everyone seemed so certain that today was about love and new beginnings. They didn't know that for me, it was the day everything ended. I must have sat there for nearly half an hour when a faint vibration buzzed in my handbag. For a heartbeat, I thought of ignoring it. Then I remembered the recorder tucked inside, silent waiting, a little insurance policy for whatever this day would bring. As I stood to stretch my legs, I heard a familiar voice echo softly from the side corridor. My breath caught. Adrian, my son. His tone was sharp, urgent, the way it got whenever he thought no one was listening. I moved quietly toward the marble pillar separating the sanctuary from the hall. "He told you not to come today," he hissed, his voice low but clear. "Just wait until after the ceremony." A pause, then a whisper. So faint I almost missed it. A woman's voice from the other end of his phone. "I can't stand it anymore. You promised me." Adrian exhaled hard, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. "I know. Just a few more hours. Once she signs the transfer, everything changes. We'll be free. No more hiding. No more pretending." I froze. The world tilted for a moment, the sound of my pulse roaring in my ears. Once she signs the transfer, he meant me. He continued, unaware I stood only a few feet away. "You don't understand how easy it'll be. She's always wanted to please me. She'll give me the money, and by the time anyone realizes what's happened, we'll be gone." I pressed my palm against the cold stone wall, the chill biting through my glove. The air tasted of wax and flowers, but all I could smell was betrayal. My son, the boy I'd once carried through every storm, was plotting to use me like a stepping stone. And the woman on the other end wasn't his bride. When the call ended, I could still hear the faint click of the phone being slipped into his pocket. A moment later, Adrian stepped out into the main hall. His face was calm, even smiling, the expression of a man about to vow eternal love. I slipped back into the pew before he could see me. My body trembled, but my mind was clearer than ever.
In my purse, the recorder's red light blinked steadily. Proof of everything. The choir's voices rose above the organ, sweet and solemn, masking the quiet storm brewing inside me. I stared at the glowing altar, the flicker of candles blurring in my wet eyes. People around me smiled, whispered blessings, adjusted hats. They thought this was the happiest day of my life. But all I could think of was the sound of my son promising another woman freedom with money that represented my entire life's work. For a moment, grief tried to drown me. Maybe I raised him wrong, I thought. Maybe love blinded me. But the sorrow didn't last long. Something colder replaced it. Resolve. I had spent decades building my world from rubble. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own flesh and blood, destroy it for greed. I smoothed the skirt of my dress, lifted my chin, and whispered under my breath, "You've shown me who you are, Adrian. Now it's my turn." The organ shifted into a new melody, louder, grander, as if announcing the start of a war disguised as a wedding. And deep inside, I knew I would not lose this battle. Not again. The choir's last notes were still fading when I rose from the pew. The air inside the church felt heavy, too thick to breathe. I told myself I needed some air, but really, I needed answers. Something deep in my chest whispered that Adrian's betrayal wasn't the whole story. There was more waiting to be unearthed. I followed the corridor that curved toward the bridal chambers. The polished floor reflected the soft glow of candles and the rush of bridesmaids in pastel dresses. Laughter floated down the hall, bright, careless, and cruelly normal. I slowed my steps, each one echoing softly, until I reached the half-open door at the end. From inside came her voice, Sabrina's, clear, confident, dripping with the same charm that had once fooled me. "And by tonight," she said between bursts of laughter, "half of everything will legally be mine. 20 million pounds. He'll never see it coming." A chorus of giggles followed, high and sharp. My stomach tightened. I leaned closer, the edge of the door cold against my cheek. "Poor Adrian," another woman teased. "You'll actually divorce him once the money's yours?" Sabrina's reply sliced through the room. "Of course I will. I've already spoken to a solicitor. Once the accounts transfer, I'll be free. I'll buy a flat in the city, hire a proper driver, travel wherever I want. He can go back to his mother's mansion and play the dutiful son alone." The room erupted in laughter again, light, champagne laughter, the kind that makes cruelty sound elegant. I stood there, frozen, the sound burning through me. Then one of the bridesmaids asked, "What about the old woman herself? You know she'll make a fuss." Sabrina's tone dropped lower, colder. "Don't worry about her. Once the money's in, I'll convince Adrian to move her into one of those luxury care homes, far away. Let someone else handle her moods and stories. She'll be surrounded by flowers and nurses. She'll think she's lucky. Out of sight, out of mind." The laughter that followed didn't sound human. It was the cackle of predators. I realized my fingers were gripping the doorframe so tightly my knuckles had gone white. Every part of me wanted to storm in, tear the veil from her head, and show her who she was really dealing with. But I didn't move. I'd learned long ago that timing is power. Rage can destroy you if you let it speak too soon. Instead, I reached into my handbag and pressed the small recorder's button. A faint red glow blinked back at me. Every venomous word, every mocking laugh, captured. Proof that would one day shatter the perfect image she'd built. I turned away quietly, the murmur of voices fading behind me. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my steps were steady. When I re-entered the main hall, no one even noticed I'd been gone. Guests were arriving faster now, hats, heels, and chatter filling the space like rising water. I took my seat again, composed, hands folded neatly in my lap. In the reflection of the stained glass,
I saw a woman who looked calm, dignified, even proud. No one could have guessed that only a few corridors away, I had just listened to my son's bride plotting to erase me from her new life. Under the polished calm, fury simmered. I imagined them both, my son whispering to his secret lover, Sabrina planning her escape. Two snakes coiled around the same fortune, both thinking they could squeeze the life out of me without consequence. I breathed slowly, forcing the anger to settle into something sharper. Clarity. For years, I had believed silence was grace, that forgiving, enduring, and giving more would earn love. But that belief had only turned me into prey. I looked up at the altar, at the flickering candles reflecting in the marble floor, and I knew. The woman I was before dawn, the one trembling in front of the mirror, was gone. What sat here now was someone new. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to own me. But I would let them finish their ceremony, walk their perfect aisle, smile for their photographs. Because when I spoke, I would do it with precision. And when I did, the whole world would listen. The bells began to ring, each chime trembling through the air like a countdown. Guests turned in their seats, faces glowing with anticipation. I sat in the front pew, hands clasped on my lap, the picture of composure. If anyone had looked closely, though, they might have seen the faint tremor in my fingertips. Not fear anymore, but control sharpening into resolve. The massive oak doors creaked open and all eyes turned. There she was, Sabrina, floating down the aisle in a gown so white it almost hurt to look at. Every bead caught the light, every step measured like a performance rehearsed 1,000 times. Her smile was radiant, the kind that photographs well, but I could still hear her voice from that dressing room, cold and cunning, plotting how to bury me in a nursing home and take what wasn't hers. For a moment, I wondered how many people in this church were pretending, how many smiles were masks, how many vows would crumble behind closed doors. It struck me that weddings weren't really about love, they were theater. And this, I realized, was the grandest act of all. Adrian stood at the altar waiting for her, tall, handsome, confident. To anyone else, he looked like a proud groom. To me, he looked like a stranger wearing my son's face, the same face that had pressed against my shoulder when he was a frightened boy, the same hands that once clung to mine for safety. As the organ swelled, the priest began his speech, words of devotion echoing through the high ceiling. Love is patient. Love is kind. I barely heard them. All I could hear were those secret voices in my head, Adrian whispering to another woman, Sabrina boasting about the fortune she'd soon control. When it came time for the vows, Adrian took her hand and smiled that charming smile that had melted hearts since he was a child. "I promise," he said softly, "to love you, protect you, and stand by you through all things." Each word sliced deeper. Protect her? He couldn't even protect his own conscience. Then Sabrina lifted her gaze, her voice smooth as silk. "I promise to care for you, cherish you, and build our dreams together." I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I smiled, because I knew the truth behind those words. A heart colder than marble, a future built on deceit. The priest's voice carried through the hall. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." For a breathless moment, I nearly stood. I felt the weight of my whole life pressing me to rise, to shatter the illusion right there, under the stained glass and candles. But I didn't. I'd spent too many years reacting, speaking in pain, not strategy. This time, I would choose the moment. My silence wasn't weakness.
It was patience. The priest continued, his tone gentle, unknowing. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The crowd burst into applause. Cameras flashed. The newlyweds kissed. I joined the clapping, slow and measured, smiling so perfectly that no one could see the storm behind my eyes. Because as they turned down the aisle, hands entwined, I whispered silently to myself, "Enjoy this. Every step you take brings you closer to the truth." When the music rose and they disappeared through the doors, I stood too. The guests followed in a wave of laughter and congratulations. I lingered at the back, my reflection caught in the glass near the doorway. A poised woman, in a navy silk dress, silver hair gleaming beneath the light. No one could have guessed that behind the elegance stood a heart set on justice. This day would not end as they expected.
The reception hall shimmered with gold light. Crystal chandeliers glowed above tables draped in ivory linen, and soft jazz hummed through the air. Laughter rippled from every corner. To anyone else, it looked like a perfect evening, the kind of fairy tale ending people post on social media and call the happiest day of our lives. I moved quietly through it all, greeting guests, smiling, playing my role to perfection. The proud mother of the groom, gracious and composed. Every compliment, every toast, every photograph felt like a scene from a play I was directing. And like any good play, I knew exactly when the curtain would fall. Adrian and Sabrina sat side by side at the head table, radiant under the golden light. He looked smug, content, unaware that his secret words now lived in the tiny recorder tucked inside my clutch. She sparkled, her laughter a practiced melody. I watched them with calm detachment, like an architect surveying a building she already knew would collapse. When the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone and announced, "And now a few words from the groom's mother," I felt the air shift. Guests clapped politely. Cameras turned. Dozens of smiling faces waited for me to stand and bless this union. I rose slowly, glass in hand. My pulse thudded, steady and strong. "First," I began, voice even and warm, "thank you all for being here to celebrate this day with us. To see my son start his new life, it fills me with pride." Polite applause rippled through the hall. I smiled, letting the warmth linger for a heartbeat. Then my tone softened. "You all know me as a businesswoman, but before that, I was just a mother who promised herself one thing, that her child would never feel hunger or fear. After my husband's death, I worked night and day to build something from nothing for him. Every brick, every deal, every sacrifice was made for love." The room grew quiet. I could feel their eyes on me, a sea of soft sympathy. "And today," I continued, "I wanted to give my son and his new wife a wedding gift worthy of that love. 20 million pounds, the savings of my lifetime." A few gasps escaped the crowd. I saw Sabrina's head tilt slightly, her lips parting in excitement. Adrian reached for her hand, trying to hide his own greedy gleam. I lifted the glass slightly higher. My voice dropped to a steady calm. "But before a gift of that size can be given, one must be certain of who truly deserves it." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. I placed the glass down gently, reached into my purse, and took out the small recorder. Its red light blinked softly in the low light. "I'd like you all to hear something first." I pressed play. Adrian's voice filled the hall, loud and unmistakable. "Once she signs the transfer, everything changes.
We'll be free, no more hiding. Gasps, whispers. A chair scraped against the floor. Then his voice again, colder this time. You don't understand how easy it'll be. She's always wanted to please me. As soon as she signs this afternoon, we'll have everything. Freedom, no strings. A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. People turned toward Adrian. His smile had vanished. He stood abruptly, face pale, stammering, "Mum, this isn't what it sounds like." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Adrian, it's exactly what it sounds like." Before the murmurs could swell further, I held up a small folded note, the one left on my pillow that morning. And just in case anyone believes this was a misunderstanding, I unfolded it. The words shimmered under the light. "Now you finally look your age."
A collective hush fell over the room. Sabrina's face was drained of color. "I woke up to this," I said evenly. "My hair shaved in my sleep on the morning of my son's wedding. A cruel joke meant to humiliate me. And now I finally know who planned it." Sabrina shot to her feet, her voice trembling. "That's not true. I'd never—" I cut her off with a soft smile. "You already told your bridesmaids. Every word recorded. How you planned to divorce him after taking half of the money. How you'd put me in a care home to get me out of the way." You could feel the air turn electric. Disbelief, whispers, phones lifted to record. Sabrina's hands shook. "You're lying," she whispered hoarsely. "Am I?" I asked, stepping closer. "Or is this just the moment you realize the game's over?" Her father stood, face crimson. Her mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Adrian sat frozen, staring at the table, unable to meet my gaze. I turned back to the guests, raising my glass once more. "So, there will be no wedding gift today. Not a single pound of my hard-earned fortune will go to deceit. My gift, instead, is the truth and the freedom it brings." The room erupted, voices clashing, gasps, the buzz of scandal spreading like wildfire. I placed the glass back down, calm and composed. Greed may glitter, but it never shines for long. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, chaos bloomed, Sabrina's sobs, Adrian's pleas, the low murmur of disbelief. Cameras flashed, but I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I didn't feel burdened. I felt light. By the time I stepped into the grand lobby, the noise had dulled into a muffled roar behind closed doors. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step deliberate, final. The door burst open behind me. "Mum!" Adrian's voice cracked. He caught up to me, eyes wild. "Please, don't do this. You misunderstood everything. I only said those things to—" "To what?" I interrupted, turning to face him. "To test her. To see how easily you could betray me." He flinched. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For a second, he looked like that lost 12-year-old boy again. Then the mask of panic returned. "I'm sorry, Mum. Please, don't leave me." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the last of my illusions dissolve. "I already did," I said quietly. "This morning, when you decided I was only a bank to break open." He dropped to his knees right there in the marble hall, sobbing. "I'll change, Mum. I swear. Please." I stepped back. "Change isn't a promise, Adrian. It's a choice. And it's yours now, not mine." The doors behind us flew open again. Sabrina stormed out, her gown dragging like a broken curtain, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You ruined my life!" she screamed. I turned to her with a calm that felt almost serene. "No, my dear, you did that yourself. I just handed you a mirror."
Her father's voice barked from the doorway. "Enough, Sabrina. We've heard enough." Her sobs filled the hall. Adrian stood motionless, face drained, while the crowd spilled out behind them, guests whispering, recording, turning a fairy tale wedding into a public reckoning. And I simply walked out into the cold night air, my head held high. The snow had begun again, fine and soft, falling over the marble steps like a benediction. I inhaled deeply, feeling the sting of winter against my skin. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel owned by anyone. I was free. The next morning, sunlight poured through my curtains like nothing had happened, as if the night before had been a dream or perhaps a long overdue awakening. The house was quiet, too quiet. No calls from the wedding planners, no cheerful chatter from my son. Just silence, the kind that feels both heavy and liberating. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, the kind I used to make back when every penny mattered. The aroma filled the kitchen, warm and grounding. I sat at the table and looked around. For years, every corner of this house had carried his echo, Adrian's laughter, his footsteps, his demands. Now it felt different. Still familiar, but lighter, like the air itself had decided to let me breathe again. On the counter lay the notebook where I'd once planned the financial future of my company. Every investment, every asset, every transfer, meticulously outlined. I opened it and stared at the pages covered in Adrian's name. For years, it had been automatic. Everything I built would one day belong to him. But that morning, with the quiet confidence of a woman reborn, I took a red pen and crossed his name out from every page. One clean line for every year I'd been blind. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. In fact, it felt peaceful. Then I called my lawyer, Mr. Lang, the man who had stood by me through decades of contracts, acquisitions, and late-night negotiations. His voice on the other end was steady but surprised. "Mrs. Hart, I didn't expect to hear from you this early. I thought you'd still be resting after yesterday's events." "Resting?" I laughed softly. "Let's call it replanning." He hesitated. "Replanning what exactly?" "My life," I said simply. "I want to rewrite my will. Every clause, every share. Effective immediately." He went silent for a moment, then replied, "I'll meet you at my office within the hour." I drove myself this time. No chauffeur, no company car, just me and the road, free of expectations. The city looked different, almost cleaner, stripped of the illusions that had clouded my view for years. When I arrived, Mr. Lang was already waiting with files stacked neatly on his desk. He said, "I read the news. It seems the wedding didn't go quite as planned." I smiled faintly. Oh, it went exactly as it needed to. He adjusted his glasses. "What would you like to do?" "I want to remove Adrian from my estate entirely. No inheritance, no trust funds. I've already given him enough chances. From now on, the money goes to those who understand its value." He nodded, scribbling notes. "And who would that be?" "To women like me," I said without hesitation. "Widows, single mothers, women who are told they can't rebuild. I want to start a foundation, one that offers small business grants to women who refuse to give up." Mr. Lang looked at me for a long moment, admiration softening his expression. He said, "That's noble." I replied, "It's necessary." For the next few hours, we rewrote everything. My will, the business succession plan, even the charitable trust clauses. Each signature I penned felt like a stitch closing an old wound. By the time I signed the final document, I felt lighter, as though I'd finally set something free, myself. When I returned home, I didn't cry, I didn't dwell. Instead, I went to the living room and looked at the framed photos lining the mantel. Birthdays, graduations, holidays that once felt like proof of a perfect family. I didn't take them down out of spite. I simply packed them carefully into a box and placed it in the closet. The past belonged there, not erased, but no longer on display. That evening, I opened the safe, took out my company shares, and filed them neatly into a new folder labeled Freedom Fund. 3 simple words that felt like a vow. The phone rang several times throughout the day, numbers I recognized but chose not to answer. Adrian's voice came through on voicemail once, cracked and desperate. "Mom, please, I just need to talk." I deleted it without listening to the rest. By sunset, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the terrace. The city skyline glowed orange, reflecting off the glass towers that I'd once thought tooth and nail to build. Each one felt like a chapter of my story. Not of loss, but of resilience. I touched the edge of my wig and smiled faintly. Beneath it, a fine layer of new hair had started to grow. It was soft, stubborn, alive, just like me. I whispered into the evening breeze, "You can't destroy a woman who built herself twice." That night, I slept without nightmares, for the first time in years.
The days that followed were still and strange, like the city had paused to let me breathe. I woke early each morning, not to dead minds or meetings, but to silence. Soft, forgiving silence. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living for anyone else's needs, demands, or moods. At first, that silence frightened me. I'd been a caretaker, a provider, a pillar for so long that peace felt unnatural. I'd catch myself standing in the kitchen, waiting for someone to call my name, but no one did. Eventually, I realized that what I'd mistaken for loneliness was freedom, learning to speak. One morning, while walking near the coast, I passed a small studio tucked between a bakery and a bookshop. A handwritten sign in the window read, "Painting classes for all ages, beginners welcome." I stopped, my breath catching. The sunlight spilled across the window, revealing easels, brushes, and canvases speckled with color. Something stirred deep inside me. A quiet memory of being 18, sketching landscapes in the margins of my notebooks before life demanded I trade dreams for survival. On impulse, I stepped inside. The room smelled of linseed oil and coffee. A handful of women sat around a long wooden table, chatting softly as they mixed paints. The teacher, a woman with kind eyes and gray curls, looked up from her palette and smiled. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. "In 40 years. She laughed gently. "Then you've been saving your colors. Sit, they're waiting for you." Her name was Margaret, and within minutes she had me holding a brush again, guiding me through the first hesitant strokes. My hand trembled, but as the color spread across the canvas, soft blues, sandy golds, something inside me steadied. Each line, each layer of paint felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd buried long ago. By the time I finished my first small painting, a rough, uneven seaside, my eyes burned with tears I hadn't realized I was holding. "Not bad for a beginner," Margaret said softly. "It's not the sea," I whispered, voice catching. "It's my freedom." From that day on, I went every week. The studio became my refuge. The women there weren't glamorous or wealthy. They were teachers, widows, grandmothers, divorcees, each one carrying her own story of loss and endurance. We painted, talked, and sometimes sat in silence, letting color speak where words couldn't. It was there that I met Henry. He was tall and quietly handsome in the way older men sometimes are, the kind who listens more than he speaks. His hair was silver at the temples, his voice calm, his humor subtle. He lost his wife years ago and had taken up painting to fill the long, echoing evenings. We started talking during class breaks, nothing heavy at first. He'd tease me about the way I overblended my skies, and I'd roll my eyes at his crooked horizons. But beneath the jokes was a shared stillness. Two people who knew what it was to rebuild from ruins. It was nearly a year later when I saw him again. The seasons had turned several times since that night. The night I'd walked away from the wedding and never looked back. The scandal had spread like wildfire for a few weeks, of course. Society loved to fall from grace, especially when gilded with money and betrayal. But time, as it always does, washed the noise away. The foundation I'd built, the Phoenix Fund, had taken flight faster than I imagined. We'd helped nearly 50 women start small businesses,
bakeries, tailoring shops, bookstores. Every success story felt like a stitch mending something inside me. My days were full, my heart light. Then, one evening, just as I was rinsing my paintbrushes after class, the studio door opened. Margaret looked up first and froze. Standing there in the doorway was Adrian. He looked older, thinner, the arrogance stripped clean from his face. His once polished suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. The sight of him jolted something deep in my chest. Not anger, not quite sadness, just a long, tired ache. "Evelyn," he said softly, voice cracking, "can we talk?" Margaret, ever the intuitive soul, gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze before slipping out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving just the two of us in the golden evening light. I turned back to my easel, dabbing the edge of a brush into water. "You found me," I said calmly. "That must have taken effort." He gave a faint, humorless laugh. "Yeah, I tried calling. You never answered." "I deleted your messages," I said simply. He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. I deserved that. There was a long silence between us. Only the soft ticking of the wall clock filled the air. Finally, he said, "I lost everything, Mom." I looked at him, really looked. The boy I'd raised was buried beneath the weight of his own choices. But somewhere in his eyes, I saw something fragile. Regret, maybe. Or the faint shadow of the son I used to know. He continued, "Sabrina left 2 weeks after the wedding, took whatever money she could and disappeared. I tried rebuilding, but word got around. No one wanted to work with me. Every door shut." I put the brush down gently. "Actions have consequences, Adrian. I warned you of that 1,000 times. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. And I'm not here to ask for money. I just needed to say I'm sorry." Those words hung in the air, heavy and trembling. I felt them not just in my ears, but in my bones. He stepped closer. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see now. What I did, what I became. You didn't deserve any of it." For a long while I said nothing. My heart was steady, but old memories rose. The sleepless nights building my company, the scraped knees I bandaged, the stories I told him before bed. Love doesn't vanish. It just goes quiet when wounded. Finally, I turned to him. "You broke my heart, Adrian. Not because you betrayed me, but because you forgot who you were." He swallowed hard. "I know," I sighed softly, "but maybe it's not too late to remember." His eyes lifted, hopeful but uncertain. "You mean—" I said, "forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a path. I'm not ready to let you back into my life completely, but I'm willing to start walking that path, slowly, if you are." Tears slipped down his cheeks. "I'll earn it, whatever it takes." "Then start by earning your own respect," I said gently. "Find a job, build something, without taking from anyone else. When you've done that, come back. Not as my son who lost everything, but as a man who found himself." He nodded, silent tears streaking his face. We stood there for a long moment, the sun dipping lower behind the glass, painting us both in the same soft gold that once filled our old home. Then he reached out, hesitant, trembling, and I let him hug me. Not fully, not tightly, just enough. Enough for him to feel that forgiveness was real, but not free. When he left, the air in the studio felt lighter, the silence softer. Margaret returned carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed me one and said nothing. She didn't need to. I looked at the half-finished canvas on my easel, a field of wildflowers bending toward the sun. The colors were bright, hopeful, and for the first time in years, I felt that way too. I thought of the road ahead, the foundation, the women I'd help, the quiet dinners with Henry, and the uncertain but possible reconciliation with my son. Life wasn't perfect, and wasn't meant to be, but it was mine. As I took a sip of my tea, I smiled to myself and whispered, "This is enough."
It's been 5 years now. Sometimes I still wake before dawn, the old habit of a woman who once measured time by meetings and profit margins, But instead of rushing to my desk or scanning reports, I simply sit by the window with a cup of tea and watch the world wake up. The city hums softly in the distance, its skyline catching the first blush of sunrise, and I find peace in knowing that I no longer have to chase anything. My life has become slower, gentler, and infinitely richer in ways I never imagined. The foundation, the Phoenix Fund, continues to grow. Every month I receive letters from women across the country, widows, single mothers, survivors of betrayal and loss. They write about opening bakeries, craft shops, small design studios, stories of rebirth, just like mine. Sometimes I read those letters out loud to myself. Each one feels like a spark rekindling an old dream. Henry is still here too. We've never married, neither of us needed to. We shared dinners, long walks by the sea, and quiet laughter over half-finished paintings. He's become the kind of companion I never knew I wanted. Steady, unhurried, kind. We live separately, but our worlds overlap in the ways that matter. I think that's love in its truest, simplest form. Not possession, but peace. As for Adrian, he did what he promised, found a small job with a local architecture firm, started from the bottom. It wasn't easy for him, but he stayed with it. Slowly, he learned the same lessons life once forced upon me: humility, patience, and the price of redemption. We meet for lunch now and then. It's still a little awkward, but it's real. He asks about the foundation, I ask about his projects. We avoid the past, not because it's forgotten, but because it's forgiven. One day he brought me a small sketch of a house by the ocean. If I ever save enough, I'd like to build this for you, a place where you can paint without the noise of the city. I smiled and told him, build it for yourself first, then I'll come visit. He laughed, a real laugh, light and unguarded, and for a moment I saw the boy I used to know. That was enough. My hair has grown back now. It's shorter, whiter, softer than before. Sometimes when I brush it, I think of that terrible morning, the note, the humiliation, the sting of betrayal. And yet, strangely, I'm grateful for it. That morning stripped away everything false and forced me to see the woman beneath it all, the one who had been waiting quietly for her turn to live. I keep that note in a small box on my dresser, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Whenever fear creeps in or doubt whispers that I'm too old to start again, I open the box and read those cruel words. Now you finally look your age. And I smile, because I do look my age. Every year, every scar, every victory. And I've never looked more alive. Last week, Margaret hosted another gallery event. This time she asked if I'd contribute one of my paintings for the main wall. I hesitated, then chose my favorite, a self-portrait I'd finished the month before. It wasn't grand or polished. It showed me sitting by the window, hair silver, eyes calm, holding a paintbrush midair. Behind me, the horizon blazed in gold and coral hues, dawn breaking over calm waters. When the painting was unveiled, someone in the crowd whispered, "She looks so peaceful." And I thought, yes, she finally is. As the evening wound down, I stood in front of that painting alone for a while. I looked at the woman I had become, not the one who gave everything away to be loved, but the one who learned that love begins where self-worth lives. I realized then that the story wasn't about betrayal or revenge or money. It was about reclamation, about finding myself again after years of being hidden beneath duty and heartbreak. When people tell me, "You're so strong," I smile, because strength was never a gift. It was something I built quietly in the ruins. And if I've learned anything, it's this. Sometimes life burns everything you've built just to show you that you can rise from your own ashes. That night, before bed, I looked in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back didn't look perfect. She looked real. Silver hair, laugh lines, eyes that had seemed too much and still chose softness. I smiled at her and whispered, "You made it." Outside, the sea murmured against the shore, steady and endless. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was living.